Most people remember the taste of expensive champagne. I only remember the sound. It was a sharp, wet slap against my skin, followed by the high-pitched cackle of my mother-in-law, Eleanor Ashford. As the vintage bubbles dripped off my chin and onto my $5 thrift store sweater, she leaned in and whispered loud enough for all 200 guests to hear, "Know your place, trash." In her eyes, I was just an orphan Lucas had plucked from a gutter. A charity case. A mistake. But as I stood there, soaked and shivering while my husband signed our divorce papers without looking me in the eye, I had a secret. 3 hours ago, I was a nobody. But one phone call changed my DNA, changed my name. And by the time this night is over, it's going to turn the Ashford empire into a pile of cold ash. If you believe that karma has a wicked sense of timing, you need to hear this. Don't move, because the woman they just threw out into the snow is about to come back and buy their entire world. The Ashford mansion was a masterpiece of cruelty. It was 2 days before Christmas. Outside, the grounds were covered in a thick, silent blanket of white. Inside, the air smelled like expensive pine needles and even more expensive cigars. A 20-foot tree stood in the foyer, dripping in real gold leaf. I stood by the service entrance, tugging at the sleeves of my cream-colored sweater. It was pilled and thin, the only warm thing I owned. For 4 years, I had been the secret wife of Lucas Ashford. While he built his tech firm, I worked 3 jobs to pay our rent. I scrubbed floors, served coffee, and tutored kids just so he could wear tailored suits. I thought we were a team. I thought he loved me. But to the rest of the Ashfords, I was a stain on the marble. "You're late," Eleanor snapped, appearing from the shadows in a burgundy velvet gown that cost more than I made in a year. She didn't say hello. She didn't wish me a Merry Christmas. She just shoved a heavy silver tray into my hands. "The guests are thirsty. Try not to break the crystal if you can even spell the word." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I was used to the taste of pride. It tasted like dust. I moved through the crowd, a ghost in a room full of gods. I saw the men in charcoal suits talking about their yachts. I saw the women in silk shawls laughing about Aspen. And then I saw him. Lucas was standing under the chandelier, looking every bit the prince I thought he was. But his hand wasn't looking for mine. It was resting on the small of a woman's back. Her name was Diane Richardson. She was tall, blonde, and wore a champagne-colored dress that looked like it had been poured onto her body. "She's perfect for him," I heard Lucas's sister, Vanessa, whisper as I passed with my tray. She made sure I heard. A real family, a real education, not some charity project from a state home. The humiliation didn't stop at whispers. Gregory, Lucas's father, cornered me near the kitchen. He reeked of expensive bourbon and arrogance. "You think you're one of us now, Magnolia?" he sneered, looking at my calloused hands. "You're a waitress, cleaner. We let Lucas have his fun with you, but the game is over. Charity has limits, and you've reached yours." I wanted to throw the tray. I wanted to scream that I was the one who paid his son's bills when he was nothing. Instead, I did what I always did. I endured. Then the music stopped. Lucas stepped onto the grand staircase, Diane glued to his side. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming," Lucas said, his voice booming with a confidence he didn't have when we were broke. "For years ago, I made a lapse in judgment. I married someone out of pity, thinking I could save them. But a man can't grow if he's tethered to the bottom." He looked directly at me. There was no love left, only ice. "Magnolia, these are the divorce papers. I'm correcting my mistake tonight, in front of everyone who actually matters." The room erupted in hushed giggles. Phones came out. Vanessa was live-streaming, her face twisted in a jagged grin. I walked forward on legs that felt like lead. The papers were open on the table. Prenuptial agreement, 0 assets, 0 compensation. "Sign it," Eleanor demanded. "You came from nothing. You leave with nothing." As I reached for the pen, Diane leaned in, her perfume smelling like lilies and rot. "Look at you," she whispered, "a shivering little orphan in a damp sweater. Did you really think you belonged in a palace? That's when Eleanor raised her glass. Splash. The champagne was freezing. The glass shattered at my feet. The room gasped, then fell into a terrifying, mocking silence. "That's for wasting my son's time," Eleanor said. I signed. My hand shook so hard the ink bled, but I signed. Lucas tossed 5 $100 bills at my feet. "For the bus," he said. Security guards, actual men in uniform, grabbed my arms and dragged me toward the massive oak doors. They threw me out into the sub-zero night. As the gates clicked shut, I felt my wedding ring slip off my frozen finger and vanish into the snow. I didn't look back. I walked 3 miles to a greasy 24-hour diner, my sweater stiff with dried alcohol. I had $247 in my bank account and nowhere to sleep. I sat in a corner booth, sobbing so hard I couldn't see the menu. And then my phone buzzed. A restricted number. Moving on with the next part of the story. I'm focusing on making the transition from victim to powerhouse feel earned and intense. I almost didn't answer. My phone was at 2%, the screen cracked just like my life. But the vibration wouldn't stop. "Hello," I croaked. "Is this Magnolia Ross?" A woman's voice, sharp and professional, cut through the noise of the diner's rattling vents. "Wrong number," I said, reaching to hang up. "I don't have anything left to sell." "Your birth name is Magnolia Grace Wellington," the woman said. I froze. The name hit me like a physical blow. "My name is Patricia Chun. I'm an attorney for Wellington Global Industries. We've been looking for you for 24 years. I let out a bitter laugh. "Wellington? As in the billionaires? Look, if this is a prank, the Ashfords already won. Just leave me alone." "Miss Wellington, look out the window." Across the street, a sleek black sedan was idling in the slush. 2 figures stepped out. A woman in a tailored gray coat and an older man with a face like etched granite. They walked into the diner, ignoring the grease and the smell of burnt coffee, and sat directly across from me. The man, Harold, slid a thick leather folder onto the sticky table. "Open it." Inside were ghosts. Photos of a woman with my exact eyes, my jawline, holding a newborn baby. There were DNA results, birth certificates, and a confession letter from a nurse named Ruth Coleman. "Your mother, Catherine, died the night you were born," Patricia said quietly. "A nurse stole you from the hospital to settle a debt. She raised you in poverty to hide her tracks. It took us 8 years of private investigators to find this diner, in this town on this night." My heart hammered against my ribs. "And my father? Jonathan Wellington," Harold said. "He owns half the skyline in this state. But he's dying, Magnolia. Pancreatic cancer. He has months, maybe weeks. His only wish is to see the daughter he lost before he goes. 3 hours ago, I was being dragged out of a mansion by security. Now, these people were telling me I owned the world." "Prove it," I whispered. Patricia didn't hesitate. She made one phone call. 20 minutes later, a fleet of 3 black SUVs pulled into the diner parking lot. Men in suits stood at attention as I walked out in my champagne-soaked sweater. The Wellington estate didn't just dwarf the Ashford mansion. It made it look like a toy house. I met him in a library filled with the scent of old books and expensive medicine. Jonathan Wellington was thin, hooked up to an oxygen tank. But when he saw me, his eyes lit up with a fire that could have leveled cities. "Magnolia," he whispered, his voice trembling. "My God. You're her. You're my Catherine." We cried for hours. He told me everything. How he never stopped searching. How he'd built an empire just so he'd have the resources to find me. But then, the tone shifted. "My brother, Raymond, has been running the company into the ground," Jonathan said, his grip on my hand surprisingly strong. "He thinks I have no heir. He's corrupt, he's cruel, and he's dangerous. If he knows you're alive before we have the evidence to bury him, you won't make it to your inheritance." "I'm used to being invisible," I said, a new coldness settling in my chest. "I can stay hidden. But I want one thing, Father. Anything. I want to destroy the people who thought I was trash. I want to watch the Ashfords lose everything." The next 2 months were a blur of war room meetings. I didn't just learn the business. I mastered it. Private tutors taught me how to weaponize my voice. I studied finance until I could spot a shell company from a mile away. I traded my $5 sweater for $5,000 silk suits. But most importantly, I hired my own team of sharks to dig into the Ashfords. And what they found was a goldmine of filth. Lucas wasn't a success. He was a fraud. He was $2 million in debt to some very bad people. He'd married Diane because her father's law firm was the only thing keeping him out of prison. And the ultimate betrayal? Lucas had found the $8,000 I'd spent 4 years saving from my 3 jobs. My emergency fund. He'd stolen it, gambled it away, and then forged my signature on high-interest loan documents. I was legally carrying $45,000 of his debt. He hadn't just divorced me. He tried to bury me alive. "It's time," I told Patricia one morning. Looking at my reflection, I didn't see the orphan girl anymore. I saw a predator. Let's introduce them to Melanie Grant. Here is the next part of the story, focusing on the psychological trap and the intense final confrontation. I didn't go back as Magnolia. Magnolia was a ghost. I went back as Melanie Grant, a mysterious European investor representing a multi-billion-dollar fund. I changed everything. My hair was cut into a sharp, icy bob. I wore designer glasses and a $10,000 taupe cashmere dress. When I walked into Gregory Ashford's boardroom, I didn't see a single flicker of recognition in their eyes. To them, I was just a paycheck. "Miss Grant," Gregory said, practically salivating as he looked at my fake portfolio. "Your reputation precedes you. A $10 million injection is exactly what we need for this real estate venture." I looked around the table. There was Eleanor, wearing the same diamond necklace she wore the night she doused me in champagne. There was Lucas, looking tired and desperate, and Diane, glowing with a pregnancy she was using as a shield. And there, sitting in the corner, was the biggest snake of all. Raymond Wellington, my uncle. It turned out the Ashfords weren't just bullies. They were partners in crime with the man trying to steal my father's company. They were all linked in a massive fraud scheme. "I only invest in family values," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "Oh, we are all about family here," Eleanor chirped, oblivious. She invited me to a celebration dinner at the mansion. Walking back into that house was like walking into a crime scene. But this time I wasn't carrying a tray. I was carrying the match that would burn it all down. During dinner, Eleanor started laughing about their success. "You should have seen the girl Lucas was with before," she sneered, sipping her wine. "Total trash. An orphan. We had to literally throw her out in the snow like a stray dog. It was the highlight of my Christmas." Lucas chuckled. "The best thing I ever did was sign those papers. Some people just aren't meant for this world, Miss Grant." I smiled back, the recording device in my purse catching every word. "You're right, Lucas. Some people really don't know who they're dealing with." The next morning, I called an emergency shareholders meeting at Wellington Global. I invited the media, the board, the Ashfords, and Raymond. They thought they were there to sign a merger. They thought they were becoming billionaires. The room was packed. Raymond sat in the front row like a king. The Ashfords were whispering about what they'd buy first. I walked to the podium. I didn't wear the glasses this time. I wore a burgundy dress, the same color Eleanor had worn the night she humiliated me. "My name is not Melanie Grant," I said into the microphone. The room went deathly silent. Lucas's face turned the color of ash. He started to stand up, his mouth hanging open. "My name is Magnolia Grace Wellington," I announced, my voice echoing like thunder. "I am the sole heir to this empire, and I am here to collect my inheritance." The chaos was instant. Cameras flashed. Raymond tried to bolt for the door, but the doors swung open. Federal agents walked in. "Raymond Wellington," I said, pointing a finger at him. "I have the evidence of the $50 million you embezzled. Enjoy your new home in federal prison." As they tackled him to the ground, I turned to the Ashfords. They were frozen in their seats. "Gregory," I said, "your real estate venture was a fraud. You're being charged with racketeering." "And Eleanor?" Since you love champagne so much, I hope you enjoy the tap water in the bankruptcy ward. Every cent you own is being frozen as of this second. Lucas stumbled forward. Magnolia, honey. It was a mistake. I was pressured. I still love. Stop. I cut him off. I own the building your company is in, Lucas. Your lease is terminated. You have 30 minutes to clear your desk before security drags you out. Just like they did to me. I leaned in closer so only he could hear. And by the way, I saw the medical records. The baby Diane is carrying is not yours. It's her ex-boyfriend's. She played you just like you played me. I walked out of that room while they were still screaming. I didn't look back when Eleanor fell to her knees, sobbing. I didn't look back when Lucas and Diane started screaming at each other in front of the world. My father died 3 days later. He died with a smile on his face because he knew his daughter was a lioness. 6 months later, I stood in my office on the 50th floor. The Ashfords were gone. Gregory was in prison. Eleanor was living in a tiny studio apartment, selling her jewelry to pay for bread. Lucas was working a dead-end job at a gas station, buried under the $45,000 of debt I had legally transferred back to his name. I visited my parents' graves that winter. The snow was falling again, thick and white, but this time I wasn't cold. I was wearing a coat that actually fit, and I had a name that finally meant something. I wasn't the trash, I whispered to the headstones. I was the storm. They thought they broke me, but all they did was sharpen me. My name is Magnolia Grace Wellington, and I am just getting started. And that is how I went from the service entrance to the CEO's office. If you think those bullies got exactly what they deserved, smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories where karma hits like a freight train. Comment justice below if you've ever been underestimated. See you in the next story.